Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's everybody doing? Hope you are doing well. My name is Andrew Kuhn from Focus Compounding, on air live with Geoff Gannon. Geoff, how's it going today?
It's going very well, Andrew. How's it going with you?
It's going great. We hope it's going great with everybody else as well. If this is the first time you're tuning in with us, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to go to focuscompounding.com to get access to everything that we push out into the investing universe. Follow me on Twitter at @FocusedCompound. And of course, if you're interested in learning about our money management services, you can reach out to me at Andrew@FocusedCompounding.com. You can get more information on that on the Invest With Us tab at our website, focuscompounding.com. All of the information is in the description below. So today, Geoff, is a podcast that we knew we'd have to talk about at some point. Of course, we, would have liked it to be a lot later than sooner. And Mr. Charles Munger has passed away at 99 years old. His birthday is January 1st. So he literally made it 9.9 or 99.9 years on this floating rock. When he passed away, I was reading a 10K or on SEC.gov. I wasn't even looking at Twitter or my phone. I was sitting right here. Then I happened to look at my phone and I saw a Wall Street Journal notification. And the first words were Charlie Munger. And instantly, my heart sank before even reading the rest of the headline. I figured that's what it was. And he passed away. And I felt surprised, which I don't know why I did. I mean, he lived a very long life that should have been celebrated. But I guess I felt surprised because just a couple weeks ago, he was on a podcast and, his mental capacity was as strong as ever, So definitely lost a giant, someone that I think everyone listening, including myself, including you, have looked up to and learned a lot from. And I thought we could dedicate a podcast to Charlie Munger and his life because his life should definitely be celebrated. 99.9 years on this earth. I would take that. If I could sign a contract right now that says, 99 years, I would take that. So I guess what are your thoughts? I sent you the email. Did you see it before I had sent you the email?
No, several people emailed me at the same time.
Yeah. Very sad. Did you listen to his recent podcast that he was on? I think his first podcast as well with Acquired, a couple of VCs. I don't know too much about them, but I did think it was funny that they're venture capitalists, and he spent majority of the podcast talking about how hard it is to be a venture capitalist, how it's not a good business model, how it's going to be hard for them in a very nice way, of course. The article that I read on the Wall Street Journal said that he died peacefully at the hospital. So, yeah. So a lot of people had emailed you about it?
All at the same time because, like you said, notifications from newspapers,
What were some things that you looked up to about Munger, right? He's this Renaissance man, this polymath, probably our generation, Benjamin Franklin. Buffett says that he's the reason that he started focusing on very high quality businesses and that Berkshire would not be what it is today without Munger's influence on him. I was going to ask you what you think was sort of a pivotal investment that Munger participated in, or just a huge, just an investment that, you think about when you think about Munger. I mean, for me, it's See's Candies because that's the investment that put Berkshire on this different path as opposed to focusing on cigar butts. But I don't know. What are some things that you look up to about Munger? I've always said I think you're much more like Munger than Buffett. But yeah, any thoughts you have on him and his life, I think people would like to hear.
Yeah. He's interesting. He managed money for a brief period of time and never managed a lot of money. Most of what people know about him is from the connection to Berkshire and Buffett. And he had a lot of interests other than investing in many of those later years. And I think a lot of the ethical things that we talk about with Berkshire were influenced as much by him as Buffett. And, even recent interviews and things where they asked about Costco or, some of the use that it has for society and stuff. I think that he want to invest in things that he feels, harm society. So I think a lot of that kind of thing with the Berkshire meeting, the two of them playing off of each other and everything, is probably what he'll be best known for, because there's not many situations where someone plays that second person role that way. And I think that's changed the image of Buffett a lot that way, and of Berkshire, because there are those two people there. And he was willing to do that. I think, yeah.
Like basically say what Buffett is thinking or how he feels, but doesn't want to publicly say it. Munger was that person to say it? Is that what you're referring to?
He was willing to play a role in which he was not the primary person, which is unusual. I mean, it almost never happens, right? Occasionally it happens in a private situation, but usually, almost always, there's a falling out and stuff when that happens. There's lots of great two-person teams and things running companies, but for various reasons, there's problems with that, especially when they get media attention on it and everything. And so I think outside of Berkshire, his role was probably very different, but he was willing to do that. And he talked a little bit about that at times. But I mean, so he's actually, the stuff where he played a more secondary role is probably what he's most famous for. And we know the least about the things where he was doing things on his own or was the sort of senior partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So do you think a lot of that comes from lack of ego?
Yeah.
Not being so crazy about, he had always said, I didn't set out to get super rich. He just wanted to become independent, and he overshot. So do you think from him, it was just, I mean, like when I think about Munger, honestly, and somebody had a tweet about this, he had said like, I don't know the exact wording. He's like, I think he said like Munger's the true G, or he's like the best. He found Lee Lu, he found Buffett, he found the guy from BYD, he invested in all these guys.
Yeah.
And then, he enjoyed life. He had a lot of children. He had a bunch of interests outside of investing. The guy had pointed out he even owned a yacht. Like basically, he lived this very like well-rounded life. And I think Buffett, as a lot of people would say, probably him too, he has spent his entire life just focused on investing, which there's no, right, wrong, or indifferent, not judging. But I think people will look at Munger and be like, he lived a very well-rounded, great life.
Yeah, I think a lot more people be attracted to Munger's life. Yeah, I mean, I think the situation where I was talking about with Buffett, it may be a lack of ego, but I don't think so as much as he just recognized Buffett as an extraordinary individual and thought you should link up with someone like that. I think he even said that to someone shortly after meeting Buffett. You don't understand what this person's like and stuff. And I think that it's probably true whether it was Lee Lu or where you're talking about with BYD or Costco or any of those things. I think those are mostly people decisions to a large part, and wouldn't have been done if it wasn't for that. So I don't think that he has any problem, that he had any problem with doing that where someone was really an extraordinary person. The other part of it is that, since he had independence in terms of what he said and what his opinions were about things, that makes it easier too. So it's not like he ever had to agree with Buffett. I mean, at the last Berkshire meeting that, Buffett was saying, oh, well, we had a lot less money back then, and that's why it was easier then than now. And he was saying, no, it was easy for everybody back then. It's impossible now,
It's going to be a lot harder. Yeah. The future's going to be a lot worse. And Buffett's like, oh, no, the future's going to be a lot better.
Yeah. So it's easy if you don't have to agree with the other person. Yeah.
Is there one thing that stands out to you about Munger and his life, maybe a lesson or something that you'll think about, or you think aspiring investors should think about?
Um, well, I think we mentioned before that he talked about reading Barron's for 50 years or whatever and getting one idea from it. Munger was obviously much more made much fewer decisions, and I think one thing that is interesting for him versus for individuals listening to this podcast to learn from, it would be easier for them to behave like Munger than like Buffett. The thing that's impressive about Buffett is that he spends all his time thinking about investments and everything and then doesn't pull the trigger, which most people can't do. So, like, for, I don't know now, over a year or something, like every quarter, Berkshire, which is Buffett and the other investment managers, has probably sold more stocks than they bought. And yet they go in from 9 to 5, looking at everything and trying to make decisions, and then, having all these choices in front of them and not making them. Charlie Munger is easier in that it was his investing, except for a period where he was running the fund, was much more like a hobby, right? And it's much easier to be a successful investor that way, as a hobbyist than as a professional, because you can't force good opportunities. Just working harder and stuff doesn't make it turn up more situations. So you have to, like how he managed Daily Journal, where they bought a lot of stocks right after the financial crisis and then did nothing for a long time. That's easier for people that way. And so I think that gives you that lesson. The same thing with like putting your money in with Lee Lu or with suggesting BYD to Berkshire. He didn't suggest a lot of different investments to Berkshire. So, these long periods of inactivity and then just jumping on something when it's a big opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I forgot to add, from listening to these recent podcasts with Todd Combs, Munger technically found Todd Combs as well. And is a huge, is the reason why he's with Berkshire, right? From all of their conversations. And Todd had said he didn't realize it at the time, but he was basically kind of interviewing him, getting to know Munger. Munger was getting to know Todd Combs before he brought him to Buffett, and was like, you gotta speak to him.
Yeah, and I think that Buffett would, that he trusted Munger on people decisions more so than anything else, probably, and his judgment of people. Yeah.
Where do you think Berkshire goes from here? Obviously Buffett's still alive and well, it sounds like. What do you think happens from here? Does it get people to start thinking more about Berkshire after Buffett and Munger?
No, I think they've already thought about that, so I don't think that that's changes it. Munger's influence on Berkshire's actual decision making and stuff, I think, was decades ago. Certainly publicly and stuff, he's been a big influence and on the annual meeting and how that works and everything. But Buffett has also just gone to speak to CNBC and things like that more often anyway over time on his own in the last 15 years or so, kind of. So I think that change has already happened, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about like Munger's ethics or his views on people and stuff like that, how are some ways you think that has really shaped Berkshire? Do you think it's more so like not investing in companies that aren't great for society? You think that's a huge reason why they have invested in tobacco companies, for example? Like there's a story in the Snowball when they went to visit Salmon Brothers and Munger asked Buffett, like, basically, are you sure this is what you want to invest in? I don't know if they're overlooking the trading floor or what, but basically was like, are you sure about this? And Buffett was, I think they said like, he was like, like he basically kind of said that, which basically means, oh shit, I don't know about this, but yep, we're doing this, So what do you think that is? Do you think that more so is just his, I don't know, just his Midwestern values, looking up to Benjamin Franklin, just these common sense approaches to life, just a very strong inner scorecard? What do you think that is? What sort of influence do you think he had on Berkshire's story like that?
Well, I think the Munger was much more rules based in his approach to things, and certainly more likely to avoid situations that would be difficult. I think he'd be much more willing to give up a lot of returns versus making the absolute best rational decision. Whereas for Buffett, it would be very difficult to make a decision that doesn't, to give up on a decision that makes sense on the numbers just because it's going to be unpleasant personally and everything. He did do that over time with getting out of doing things like Dempster Mill and stuff. That taught him enough about that to avoid those situations, even when they were very attractive. But I think, Munger, after he got rich, I think wouldn't worry about that kind of thing. I don't think he would mind if Berkshire had a few percentage points less or whatever in return, as long as it meant not having to deal with certain things that were more likely to cause trouble down the road.
So you're basically saying he's much more willing to step over a dollar bill that he thought could be worth $1.50, or step over 50 cents that he thought could be worth $1, if the return on brain damage wasn't there.
Yes, I think that's definitely true. Thinking about how you want to live your life and the difficulties that's going to cause for you and all that kind of stuff, yes. Whereas Buffett is much more calculating that way in terms of, looking at the situation and can they really pass that up and everything. I think that Buffett makes much more sense as someone to run Berkshire than Charlie Munger would, because I don't think Charlie Munger would have kept doing it ever. I mean, I'm sure he would have retired and stuff from something like that. That's not, most people would. For Buffett, it is, I think, just a game. And so the numbers, it doesn't matter that he has unimaginable wealth and stuff. That would have caused him to stop 50 years ago if he was worried about how much money he had,
Mm-hmm. Is there anything about his life? I know his life and career are one and the same, but is there anything about his life that you admire or you think about when you think about Munger?
Oh, well, there's the book Damn Right and other things that you can find about Munger. Munger had an operation that went badly, and how he dealt with that, also how he dealt with the death of a child and everything, are things that people could look into on that. Because it was human error, basically, in the case of the operation. But, I
You
think
referred to his eye, yeah.
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 But it wasn't just the loss of an eye, but the incredible amount of pain and stuff that you go through from that because of what happens. And normally you would, sue, and it would be a big deal doing that, but he did not.
He rationalized it by saying, well, 5% of these operations, that happens. So that's literally what he said, I think, in Damn Right. Yeah. That's what I think about as well, too. He was divorced, broke. His 9-year-old son died, which I can't imagine that pain. And then, he lost his eye, and just this act of what he called soldiering on, right? Just continuing to move forward and push forward and soldier on. That's definitely what I think about most when I think about him. It's not the fact that he was, Buffett's right-hand man or worth a couple $1 billion or whatever. It was just this.
Yeah, and so that relates to a lot of the psychology of misjudgment and his interest in psychology and all of that. But it is worth mentioning that he wrapped up the partnership basically for that reason. That while he was able to do that, I think he realized that that's not how other people work, and that managing money for other people, you really can't do that. You can't control their thinking about that kind of thing and being able to soldier on with stuff. And so, I think that's something that he decided he did not want to continue to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he had a bunch of other interests, right, outside of investing. I mean, you had talked about psychology. I mean, it sounds like he was really big into architecture, science, studying, past what you would call like great individuals. I mean, he literally knew basically everything. When you're listening to Todd Combs talk about, they were talking about, some physics thing and the laws of the universe. I mean, Munger was basically, he knew about all of it. You could sound like you could throw anything at him and he had some familiarity with him, right? Well read. He just spent his entire life, reading and learning and pushing forward. And, from that podcast that we listened to that came out, I don't know, a month or so before he passed away, which I imagine was recorded somewhat recently, his mind was still there, which I think for somebody like him that is such an intellectual power horse, not losing his sanity or his mind towards the end, is everything. It would have been obviously way worse if he just his mental acuity declined. I mean, it sounded like he was basically Charlie Munger, right up to the end. And Becky Quick, she actually has a documentary, I think, coming out tonight. We're recording this on Thursday, November 30th, and I believe at 7 p.m. tonight, there's a tribute to Munger because she had recorded something at his house recently to prepare for, or I think this video was for his 100th birthday next month. And they released some parts of it. And, like he even talked about naturally him and Buffett thought about, purchasing bigger and better homes because a lot of their friends throughout their life, as they became incredibly successful, bought bigger and better homes. And they stayed away from it, both him and Buffett. And Becky asked him why. And he said because they thought it would be better for their kids, right? It's all about the children. And sometimes children, when they come in this crazy amount of wealth, they think they have to live a certain way or they're above other people or whatever. And I don't know, just his personality is something that I admire and something that I think should be studied and looked up to. I got to say, I'm quite sad that Walter Isaacson hasn't done like a biography on him. I know he just released a book on Elon Musk, which I read and I liked, but I think Musk's story is still going on. I think it was a little premature. But Walter Isaacson has written a book on Benjamin Franklin and a few other, obviously Steve Jobs. Did he do it on, is there someone else like Mozart? I don't know who else he did it on, but I think he would be a perfect candidate for Walter Isaacson. And Rational Walk actually tweeted that out, and I was like, yeah, I agree completely. So yeah, very interesting life. I feel like my grandfather passed away, I will say. It's sad, but it also on the other side is amazing. 99 years, 99.99 years, like very well lived. And as someone that, like I tweeted out, I'll often think about him until the day I die, and just his principles, and the way that he thought about life. I think he lived a very good life. Do you have any final thoughts on Munger?
No, I mean, most of you can still enjoy all of the different things that he's put out in the different conversations that you have, all the transcripts that you have, all the books that they have there. So I think that, that was always his thing, to read things, whether, I forget what he called it, Making Friends with the Eminent Dead or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you can certainly do that, whether he's alive or not.
Yep. That's the good part about Legends Never Dying, right? It's like, I'm going to continue to talk about Munger as if he's still here on this earth. Do you think he was a religious person?
No.
Really?
He didn't comment on that when asked about it, but no.
Yeah. I remember I've seen that video. Buffett said he's agnostic, and Munger just basically said that he doesn't want to talk about his religion.
I think Munger was more likely to not talk about political topics, controversial topics, things like that, than Buffett. I think Buffett has changed on that, and I think that in the last 10 years or so, he's changed to not wanting to talk about those things. But I think there was a time when Buffett would talk more openly about that stuff. I think that Munger would not talk about things that he doesn't think that he would be able to change people's opinions on and stuff, and just know that there's certain topics that you just shouldn't bring up.
So if I had to guess, I would think he believed in something. Okay. Even Einstein believed in, something, this higher power or whatever. So if I had to guess, that's what I would think. I don't think he would consider himself agnostic or atheist or anything. I think if I had to guess, I think even though he's very science and minded and, thinks about biology and Darwinism and all this stuff, I still think that he would believe there's something, So for what that's worth. Anyways, well, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in with the both of us on the Focused Compounding podcast. I'm going to speak about Munger, like I said, and Buffett, just as I always do, just as if he's alive, right? Legends never die, and his principles will live on forever. And I am greatly indebted to him because obviously he has shaped a lot of my life and the way that I think about things. And yeah, he's definitely a hero of mine. And I think that's obvious to people that have listened to us over the past 5 years. So I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in with Geoff and myself on the Focused Compounding Podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you are listening or watching us here today. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Focused Compound. We are uploading podcasts on Mondays and Wednesdays. If you have any topics you would like us to go over, you could shoot them over to me at andrew@focusedcompound.com or DM them to me on Twitter. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next podcast. Take care.